God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Are you familiar with the O. Henry short story, Gift of the Magi? In case you're not, it's a wonderful story, and I'm going to have to ruin the end for you if you haven't read it yet, so just bear with me. But a poor, young married couple, very much in love, plan to give one another special gifts for Christmas. And the wife's greatest asset is her beautiful long hair. And the husband's, one of his greatest treasures, is a watch that had been given to him. It's a very special, expensive watch. And so the wife planned to buy him a chain for his watch. And of course she had no money to buy a fine chain, so what did she do to be able to afford the chain? She sold her hair. So now she had short hair. And the husband planned, guess what he planned to get for his wife? Well, in order to get the gift for his wife, he sold his only possession of real value, the watch. And he used the money that he sold, that he got from selling the watch, to buy very fine, beautiful combs for his wife's lovely long hair. So when they present gifts for one another, of course she gives him a chain for the watch that he no longer has, and he gives her combs for the hair that she no longer has. It's a great story. O. Henry was very good at telling stories with a twist at the end. If you read some of his other works, you can always expect some kind of twist to be there. And it's interesting to me that this story is titled Gift of the Magi. Why did he choose that title? It makes me think about our story of the Magi that we heard this morning from Matthew's Gospel. And if you pay attention, this story also has twists. There are 3 of them that I want to highlight this morning. The first twist is the fact that they were magi. You know what that means? It gets translated as wise men, but it also means astrologers. Right? This is really strange because the Bible actually condemns the use of astrology or divination. It says that that's idolatry, to try to read the heavens or read signs on earth to predict the future. It actually says that's a no-no, that you can't do that. And yet, these wonderful figures of faith that we now sing about and tell stories about were doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing. So the very fact that they were magi is itself a twist. Think about that. What is that saying to us? I think it says that God can speak to and through anyone. So let's think about that. The next time you're speaking to someone who is unchurched, let's say, someone of another faith, I think we should really listen. They might have something to tell us. It might be something that we haven't thought of before, something that we're so entrenched in our own routine that we couldn't really see. They might have a different way of seeing things, even though they're practicing or not practicing a different religion, like the wise men were. God still might be able to use them. And not just them, but God might also be able to use you. I want you to come away from this worship service today asking yourself, what do I have to offer? God can speak to and through anyone. That means even you. So think about that. That's the first twist. These were magi. We wouldn't expect God to use for God's purposes. But God still does. God's that big. The second twist, I think, is the gifts that they offer. Right? So the wonderful thing about gifts of the Magi There are these beautiful gifts of the comb and the watch chain, and they end up being terrible gifts. Absolutely useless. You know, when you open up a gift and you have no use for it, or you already have one like it, or it's just something that is the wrong gift. Well, at face value, these gifts of the Magi from the story might seem like they're useless gifts, just absolutely the wrong gift. And the gifts of the Magi, the wise men, from our story, are a little strange, are they not? I mean, we're used to them. Maybe when you were a kid, you dressed up and you carried one of them in a Christmas pageant or something. So it might be something really familiar to you. If you think about it, how would you give a baby gold and frankincense and myrrh? Matthew doesn't even really explain why these gifts are offered. And in one of our beloved Christmas carols, We Three Kings, there is kind of an interpretation of the gifts. That gold is offered because gold is a gift for a king. And frankincense is offered because frankincense was a signal of a deity, of God nearby. And then myrrh was offered because myrrh was an embalming, was used for embalming funerals. What a strange gift to give to a newborn baby. Really strange. And yet these were gifts that meant something. I mean, they must have been given with great faith. And they were great treasures too, so they were given from the center, not from the leftovers. Just like the gifts of the Magi. Those are really sacrificial gifts, were they not? This couple was impoverished, and so the woman sold her hair to be able to buy a gift for her husband. The husband sold his watch to be able to buy a gift for the wife. This was not something they just used their Christmas bonus for. This was a gift that came from who they were. So when you ask yourself, what do I have to offer? You might think your gifts don't measure up. You might wonder whether they're useful, whether they're appropriate for your life and your context. But I'm here to tell you, because our story is here to tell us, when you give something from your center, from who you really are, when you give out of your giftedness, when you give from the gifts that God has given to you and you alone, those gifts are profoundly useful in ways that you can't even imagine right now. Your gift, when it's given from the heart, will go very, very far. How far, we can't imagine, as I said. And that's where the third twist comes in. These wise men from the East, the astrologers, they had great faith, did they not? I'm really struck by the fact that they just saw a star and dropped everything and made this journey to come and worship the king that the star heralded. What an incredible sacrifice that they made. And after they've come to worship the king, what does it say? It says they're overwhelmed with joy. If you think about that, when you're just giving a pure act of worship to God, when you're giving from who you are, it's joyful, is it not? It's something that actually brings you bliss. And we see that in the story of the wise men. They've taken this great risk to just drop everything and go on this great journey to an unknown place to worship an unknown king. And instead of bringing them fear and anxiety and worry and trepidation, maybe it did bring them some of those things, but what does the story tell us it really brought to them? Joy. Overwhelming joy. And then when it was time for them to go back, how did they go back? The way that their dream told them to. Now this is interesting. The Bible actually acknowledges that God can sort of speak to us through dreams. So it doesn't condemn dreams the way that it condemns astrology. So these wise men were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod and to go home a different way. And so they actually exhibited this great faith again to not participate with the powers that be, to not cooperate in the way that they were expected to cooperate, to take a risk and to defy King Herod. And in doing so, they probably saved Jesus. Right? Herod wanted to know where Jesus was so that he could get rid of this threat to his rule. And so the wise men, by not going back to Herod, actually cooperated with God rather than the powers that be. And in doing that, they showed great faith. So let's ask ourselves, how is God calling us to take a risk? It might not be to the same degree that the wise men do. I don't think that God wants all of us to just drop everything and go somewhere new and leave our lives behind. Maybe for one of you, I don't know. But I think we could take a little bit more risk than we are now, probably. I think that we could step out in just a little bit more faith and surrender than we currently are. We can always grow a little bit more in our faith. And so, in the year ahead, in 2015, I encourage you to ask yourself, what do I have to offer? I know it's something. I know God can speak to you and through you. I know that if you give your gifts, it's going to bring you joy in ways you can't anticipate. And that when you step out in just a little bit of faith, that God meets you and takes you on a wonderful journey. And that's good news. And for that, I say thanks be to God. Amen.
Amen.